1 o'clock. Let me assure you I am not contagious. I'm not contagious, okay? I've tested negative numerous tests over the last while, so it's all good, okay? So please do not worry about that. And I would never ever risk infecting anybody else. Still suffering through shortness of breath and coughing and everything else, so you'll excuse me if I'm sucking air a little bit and out of breath, a bit, so please excuse me for that. So we will begin then. First of all, let me confirm, did everybody here get the announcements, emails that I pumped out last week? Yes? Yes? And did we all read the course outline? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes? 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 Okay, good. And did we all watch the videos?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, Prof.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, let me start again. For you guys who were late and came in, you got my email, you watched the videos, am I correct? Yes? Okay. Yes? Okay, so anyway, let us proceed then with the topic of today, actually, in a little while. However, for now, let's just do a little bit of a review of the material that I conveyed to you via the videos. Now, you will note also, consistent with what I had mentioned, that the videos were not designed to be videos per se, and they were not intended to communicate information per se. So yes, they were a little clunky, and they were substantially less than perfect, however, the material that was contained and attempting to convey in the video was quite sound indeed, right? So all the material and the content was there. A little clunkier than I would have liked, but like I said, it wasn't designed for that. So it was basically a video capture of a couple of lectures that I gave during the COVID thing, where everything was delivered remotely, so that's basically that. At any rate, the information was there. So let us just do a quick little review of the video, shall we? So we started off the first video, and I had some pictures up, right? To start off, and the pictures I always put up in an effort to try to convey, a little bit of salient topic areas and that. So what were the first pictures here? What's the first
Mountain
picture? Mountain View, eh? Right, exactly. And we all know Mountain View, am I right? Mountain View, very prominent brand, right? Very prominent international brand, right? I think everybody around the planet pretty well is aware of Mountain View, am I right? Yeah. So it's a prominent brand, right? And so we wanted to talk about brands, right? Because, how about brands and marketing? Are brands important to marketers and marketing? Well, yeah, right? Critically important. As marketers, we are hyper-focused on brands. Brands in marketing are something that are sacred, and I use that word sacred, right? It is absolutely sacred. Brands are sacred in marketing. Very important in business overall, but especially important in marketing. As marketers, we manage the brand, right? And build the brand and monitor the brand, monitor the health of the brand, right? So brands are critically important, right? And so what do we want to do in marketing? We want to, as I like to say, and I don't want to sound like I'm overstating it, but what we want to do with the brand is that we want to take that brand essentially and drive it into the heart of the consumer, right? And I will say it now and I'll say it again consistently throughout our course. That's what we want to do as marketers, right? So do we want, you know, consumers of our brand to just sort of think about our brand?
Yes.
The answer is yeah. We want them to think about the brand, but more importantly, we also want them to feel the brand, right? That's even deeper. That's even a deeper understanding than just thinking about it, right? So essentially then, what do we want to do? What's our ultimate kind of orientation in marketing with respect to brand management? We want to take that brand and drive it into the heart of the consumer, right? That's what we're trying to do. So at the end of the day, when the consumer goes back home to his or her supper table, you know, what would we like ultimately? We would like our consumers to be talking about our brand, conveying the brand, relating stories to other people about the brand, right? So this is important. This is the kind of thinking that we bring to bear, right? So the question then becomes, okay, well, how do we do that then, right? How do we do that? Sounds easy to say it. The question is, how do we really execute that kind of orientation, right? And the way that we do it essentially is that we practice and we understand. The only way we can really practice it is to understand it and understand everything that we are going to be talking about in this course, right? That's what we need to do. Understand everything that we're about to talk about over the next, 2 months, right? So that's what we're striving to do, trying to understand the things. Not just memorize a bunch of facts, right? Any monkey can understand, any monkey can execute rules and execute a bunch of steps, right? That's nothing, right? Any AI function can execute steps. Right? What separates us as humans from AI and low-end kind of low-end employees is that we as managers, we think about it. We think about things in a novel kind of a way. We push the boundaries. We try to create things, right? And that's the kind of thinking that we bring to bear, and that's the kind of thinking that I try to impart and emphasize with my students, right? That's what we want to do, right? And we always, in so doing, we always want to strive for excellence, right? As an unapologetic perfectionist, we always strive for perfection, high standards, right? That's what we should be striving for. High standards of understanding and learning, right? In other words, we do not want to be a bunch of yardbirds scratching around in the sand, picking out seeds to eat, right? Those are yardbirds. We don't want to be a bunch of yardbirds, right? We want to be people of excellence, people of professionalism, and accordingly move forward and execute our duties that way. That's what we should be striving to do, right? And the way that we do it, certainly in our little world of marketing here, is that we seek to understand the things that we will be talking about, right? Not just memorizing drills. So, right, when we talk about the brand, then, getting back to the brand, in question, which is not on you. The question then, and I asked it then, and I'll ask it again, is a brand typically something that is static? Is a brand static? Yes or no?
No.
Why not?
Because the brand has to change with the change of customer preferences, and the customer preferences are not static. Like it changes over time, every day, every month, every year. So
well said. Absolutely. So we need to monitor the brand, right? And we will not be getting into this kind of sort of detail right here and now. We could talk for the next year about just monitoring brand and monitoring the brand health, which is what we want to do as a brand manager, to monitor the health of a brand. monitor the health of the brand, right? That's what we want to do, to monitor the health of the brand. And the whole way by which we can do that, right? Which we will not be getting into here in this case. Okay, so we have made the point then that brands are ever changing. So what changes a brand? What pushes a brand then?
Consumer taste, probably.
Right, as we mentioned, quite right. What else?
Innovation.
Technology. What else? Sure, competitive actions within the marketplace. Sure, what else? All those things,
Socio-cultural
right?
influences. Socio-cultural influences.
Big time, eh? Big time. So getting back to that video then, and back to the whole Mountain View thing then, can social influences, you know, affect brand performance? Right? Yeah, exactly. And so I talked a lot about that during the video, right, on Mountain View. So in 10 words or less, in the video with respect to Mountain View, what about Mountain View? How does society change it? What did I say? Tell me. Did you watch the video? You don't remember? Okay. Who remembers? How about you? Mountain View. Mountain View. Can societal forces change and affect a brand? How?
Like they mentioned, preferences change all the time.
Okay, well, we've established that, now we're talking about general societal forces. Okay, what was the example that I talked a lot about that, in fact, during the first video and with respect to Mountain View? What happened to Mountain View then as a brand?
Professor.
It almost went, who am I looking at?
The branding.
It almost went my birthday, it almost did, absolutely. And why is that? Okay, well, what did I say in the video here? Repeat back to me what, the points that I made in the video. I'm not getting a warm fuzzy feeling here now. I'm not getting a fuzzy feeling. Okay, let me rephrase it, yeah, go ahead.
I remember, but it was something like, you said something, like, it was the time of rock and roll and it was the sixties and
Yeah.
People were in the phase of we love everything, something about this.
Yeah, so the notion then is that, and we won't get into it here, the notion then is that societal changes and societal culture, cultural changes, societal cultural changes here can impact the brand, right? That was the point that I was trying to convey. And that's an important consideration, right, from a marketing perspective. Culture can absolutely, and changes and shifts in culture, shifts in societal forces, right, culture can absolutely affect the brand, right? And that was a whole example. And so if you have not watched it, please do watch it again, and I explain all that. I won't repeat it again, but I will explain it all there, and it's good to know. Okay, what was the next major sort of picture that I showed here?
Excel.
Excel, right? And we know that Excel typically is dumb, however, that was not dumb, it was,
Brand extensions, we spoke about how, using the name of the, I mean, what we associate as gum and a reputed brand of gum
Yep.
to promote selling of lozenges, which, even though they branded it very clearly, think of drop lozenges, because we associate Excel with chewing gum,
yep,
right? As a consumer, you think that, you know, it's the same or similar, or it comes with a good credibility, so you buy it.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So basically what we're doing then is that absolutely is, as we had mentioned, thank you, great explanation. That was absolutely what we call a brand extension, right? Very, very important in marketing, brand extensions. And we will talk more about brand extensions and how they work later in the course. However, for now, I sort of just wanted to sort of introduce you a little bit to another sort of aspect associated with brands and brand management, and that is brand extensions, right, as you rightfully said. So basically, when we talk about brand extensions, then, is that what are we doing in a brand extension then? We are leveraging a known brand name to do what? To enter a new product category, and that's what Excel is doing, absolutely right, absolutely. Entering a new product category, right? Because I mean, the over-the-counter cough medication, if you will, that is not the same, product category as gum. It's a completely different product category, right? So that's basically what we're doing. So the notion then, and one of the major reasons why brand extensions are so important and popular, the vast majority of new product introductions are brand extensions. And one of the major reasons is because, brand extensions, it lends instant credibility to the extended brand. Instant recognition, instant credibility, and that's the benefit of it. The consumer will look at it and say, oh yeah, I know that, that's great, So it's really great from a marketing perspective to build on that. So brand extension is very important. Again, we will talk more about that. Furthermore, I also introduced a few other major topic areas which are very important. By way of pictures, the next major topic area that I sort of wanted to stimulate a bit of discussion about was what? What was it? Pricing, absolutely, yeah. Very good, yeah. Pricing. How important is pricing? Pricing important? Big time. Big time. I mean, if we get pricing wrong, what happens? In a heartbeat, right? So pricing is critically important. And so one of the major points that I made, not only is pricing important from purely a financial or an economic and an accounting perspective, but it also is important because it conveys a lot of information about the brand, right? So it's a major communicative kind of a tool we could use, right? And so one of the points that I was trying to emphasize, and again, we will talk more about pricing later in the course, but one of the points that I was trying to emphasize is that, yeah, not only is price in and of itself, the actual hard number important, but the way by which it's communicated, the context by which it is presented to the consumer, I argue, is just as important, if not more important, than the actual price itself, right? And you saw examples of that, right? Right? What was the example?
There was this Hitachi that was.
Yeah, and it was, how was it presented then?
There were a number of options which were cancelled, and then there was a final price.
Sure, absolutely was, yeah. So basically, the way that that final price was presented to the consumer, in fact, was that, as you rightly said, was that it was presented to the consumer as a discount off of a higher price, right? Higher price, stroke, that number, right? That's the way it was presented to the consumer. And then superimposed on that, we have some other, more consumer behavioral, perceptual kinds of issues at play also, namely the red sign, the lettering, all that kind of prominent, all that kind of stuff too, right? That were important, right? So then we ask ourselves the question, well, why do we want to present price as a discount off of a higher price, right? Did I ask that? I can't remember. Did I ask that in the video? Did I talk about that? Can't remember. Yeah. As opposed to, say, a premium over a lower price. In other words, do we ever want to present the final price as, $29.99 stroke $49.99? That's our final price. Do we ever want to do that?
No.
Why not?
Because as marketers, we always try to set the reference price higher in the mind of the consumer, so that they think that they're getting a better deal out of it.
Right, and why is that important?
Because as a consumer, you always want to get more for less, right?
Sure.
That's what I want, right? I don't want to be paying more. I mean, if it was cheaper, I'll wait for the price to drop if for whatever reason it's increased,
Yes,
rather than buying it when it's at a higher price.
beautifully said. Absolutely, right? And that, by the way, is what we call the psychological concept of loss aversion, right? And that is the notion then that as humans, it's hardwired into our DNA. It's not something that is culturally sound. It's not something that is, that we sort of learn along. It is something that is hardwired into us as humans. The notion that we hate losing things, right? It all hinges on, evolution theory and survival of the fittest and that kind of thing. We attend to those negative things more so than positive things, right? Because by doing so, it enhances the continuation of the species, et cetera, et cetera. Right, so that's the kind of thing, right? So this notion then, getting back to it, is that we hate to lose things, right? And a price, which depicts a potential expenditure of money, is a loss. It is an economic loss. And so therefore, we try to minimize it, and that's hardwired into us as humans. We hate losing stuff, right? So that's a key thing, right? So it's with that psychological understanding then that it enables us then to, it informs us, it enables us then to move forward with pricing and understanding how pricing works when we understand basic human behavior, cognition, and that kind of thing, right? So if we are to do pricing, we need to understand basic human behavior, right? Because price theory essentially is an exercise in consumer psychology. Pricing is an exercise in consumer psychology. That's what it's all about, to a large extent. Yes, there are technical aspects, financial aspects, absolutely, but fundamentally, when we talk about price, it is an exercise in psychology, right? And so that is a key thing for us marketers to understand. So, we also talked about, and I depicted another example that I took in Walmart, and that was,
A deodorant.
that's right, right?
The
Very
trivial
popular
attributes.
product category, exactly right, ladies, thank you. Very good. And what did we say there essentially? What was the
So
crux of
Professor,
it?
there was this particular deodorant of a particular brand. They were having two types of product.
Right,
So the product category was same as the deodorant, but the packaging was a bit different.
yes,
And there was some wordings over there, so which in the marketing terms you have called the gimmickry words that people they do use to make a psychological impact in people's mind. For example, there was this health benefits or like clinically proven.
clinical.
So in consumer minds it happens like maybe this particular deodorant has been tested in a very subliminal way or a good way that we can use and it will not affect in other perspective. For example, my health.
So, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me just, great explanation, you're absolutely right, thank you, by the way. So let me just interrupt you, so then we talked about that, is that a fact, or is that an implication and a conclusion that a consumer might draw,
Yeah.
right?
So it's the consumer's perception that they will draw from the particular wording.
Exactly right,
So that's how the marketer is trying to use these radial attributes.
in that particular
Yes.
instance, exactly right, and it is related to price, it's commanding a higher price and that
Yes.
kind of thing. And what do we call that, by the way? There's a specific term that we use here.
Trivial attributes.
Absolutely, trivial attributes, right? And trivial attributes, by the way, you do not see, typically you don't see mention of trivial attributes in the textbooks. So you don't really see it in that kind of a thing, and seldom is it really taught in certainly introductory marketing courses and that, But I always like to talk to my students about it because I'm all about maximizing students' learning and understanding, number one. And it's an interesting little thing, and it helps us to understand how some of this stuff works a little bit, right? By talking about this thing that we call trivial attributes, So trivial attributes. What's another example of a prominently used trivial attribute that we see a lot?
So Professor, it could be like mountain grown coffees.
Sure, absolutely.
Like in the shampoos we use like shiny, making it sleek and
Silk.
smooth.
Silk,
Yeah, for the
Word silk.
shampoo, yes.
yeah, on shampoo, absolutely. Yep, very good, nice explanation. So yeah, absolutely, so that's trivial attributes we talked about there. So there's a lot going on, right? And so I sort of bring out these photos and these, discussion points, to sort of convey to you that, when we talk about this crazy zany world of marketing, there's a lot going on here, And so that's the kind of thinking that we want to bring to bear on our course here, a little bit. So yeah, that's a key thing. Right, very nice. So, those were some of the introductory discussion points, yeah? And then, we then got into, a couple of other major points in the second video, and that was where I attempted to, this is a course in marketing. It's a course on a major business discipline, and so therefore I wanted to sort of paint the picture for you as to how marketing thinking has sort of evolved over the last half century or so, 4 or 5 decades. And in so doing, the way that I did that then was to have a look at the definitions and the way that formal definitions of marketing as a discipline have changed over time. So therefore I appealed to our governing authority for worldwide marketers called the AMA, the American Marketing Association, major governing kind of organization. They put out a lot of research and stuff, for marketers, both scholarly marketers and practitioners also. The AMA does, I am a member of the AMA. And so it helps us to sort of organize our collective thinking globally. Right? So anyway, so we had a look at, the definitions over periods of time. We looked at about 3 or 4 definitions. And then what that did then is that it gave us a snapshot in time, and it allowed us to see how thinking and what marketing as a field has sort of changed, and how it's evolved over time, right? And it's important to sort of look at it that way because, unlike other business disciplines, marketing is a very, very young discipline, right? How old are academic disciplines like philosophy? How old is philosophy as an academic area of study? 35, 4,000 years old maybe? How about mathematics? Who knows? Well over 4,000 or 5,000 minimum, I would argue.
That's true.
Right? Thousands. How about marketing? Yeah, no, 100, 120, 130, 140 years old as an academic. So it's very, very young. So the point here is that it's very immature, and it's continually evolving, and it does rely on mother disciplines in order to inform itself. And so our mother discipline in marketing is economics, right? So we use a lot of, marketing really grew out of the mother discipline of economics primarily, and psychology a bit of sociology, but mainly economics. So marketing grew out of economics. And so we appeal to economics, to inform ourselves to a large extent in marketing. And now, of course, it's starting to come of age and more so. But that basically is sort of a scholarly evolution of it. So yeah, and so we ended off then, we won't go through all the iterations here, but we sort of ended off with the most current definition of marketing, right? And so when we looked at that evolution, essentially what are some of the major conclusions that we can draw from that? Well, we see how, over the last 50, 40, 50, 60 years, marketing has really evolved. And it has gone from a discipline that was really focused on the soul notion of exchange, coupled with the 4 Ps. What are 4 Ps?
Product, price, promotion.
Coupled with the 4 Ps, pretty well where we are right now. Where we are right now, we're looking at it more of a force for good, right? And fundamentally, I would suggest that really the way that we look at marketing now is that it is about relationships, right? Long-term relationships with the consumer. That's how we look at marketing. It's about building, fostering, developing those long-term relationships with the consumer, right? And how can any relationship really form and evolve and grow through honesty, right? Through honesty, through ethical conduct, through ethical behavior, as an good, right? Like any kind of a relationship. And so therefore, right now, and you will see this in the most current definition of marketing, and that is where marketing really contains that word society, right? So that's how we now look at marketing, as a force for good. It's a force for societal good. We can do good things, right? And that's sort of the current thinking. Relationships and a force for good, right? In addition to all those structural things. Yeah, we're still, interested in the notion, the economic notion of exchange and the four P's and all that. And yeah, absolutely. But we look at it that way. Any questions so far on anything we've spoken about? Or clarification or comments? And so another point that is important is that, marketing is a force for good. So marketing is, and the practice and the execution of marketing as it is what this practice is not the sole purview of for-profit organizations. Right? In other words, all organizations, one way or another, engage in marketing. All organizations engage.
Marketing is not.
What? Is that you?
Yeah.
Is that your computer? Why did that happen?
Activated press.
Oh, okay. So it's a force for good, and what was the point that I was making? I lost my train of thought. All organizations can practice marketing, right? So all organizations can practice marketing, So it's not only the purview of for-profit organizations. I mean, major not-for-profit organizations, NGOs, governments, educational organizations, major charities, virtually every major religion on the planet practices marketing one way or another, So it is not solely the purview of for-profit organizations, so it is a force that can affect change, right? Absolutely right. And of course, we can then ask the question, this is an aside, okay, if we are saying then that a brand can change, if a brand can change in relation to societal forces, and marketing and everything can change as a result of societal forces, would it not then be logical to flip that whole argument around and say, okay, well, can marketing then affect society?
Yep.
Okay? What is a major way by which we do marketing? Communicate with consumers. Largely by how? Advertising, which is a major form of marketing communications, advertising. How important and how influential is advertising in society? Does advertising have a big role to play in society? Big time. Big time. Whether we realize it or not is a different story. But does society and marketing efforts via advertising have an effect on people overall? Big time. Big time. From governments, political endeavors, organizations. I mean, we are continually, from the moment we wake up, whether we realize it or not, we are continually being saturated and hit by marketing efforts. So does that drive, can that impact societal culture? Absolutely does. 100% it does. Again, whether we realize it or not, it's there. But yeah, that's a huge way to play. Right. So we trace it out, and that's sort of where we left off. And that's how we think of marketing now. So at that point, then, I introduced some important topic areas to you. These are very, very important, right? And these we need to hoist the board, we have to know, because this is what marketing is all about. Okay, so I said to you, I think in the video, what I say now, if we take this whole discipline of marketing that we are talking about, right? And we peel it away, we peel off all the fluff, all the layers, and we get down to a core concept, core notion of what marketing is all about. In other words, if I were to ask you to say, in 10 words or less, what is marketing? The core, the essence of it. What would you tell me? Well, yeah. But there's a core note, a well-known notion. I talked about it in the second video, yes. So.
That's why I think raising awareness to the consumers regarding the product, like the they're unaware of it, or if they want to familiarize, if it's going to help in their daily lifestyle or not.
Okay, well, then that is absolutely correct, but marketing is more than that, right? We're getting down to ultimately what is marketing all about, and there is a defined concept. There's half the
Meeting
answer
the
right
needs
there.
and wants of the consumers profitably.
Profitably, exactly right, exactly right. And what do we call that?
Marketing.
Non-marketing concept. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about the marketing concept, there are a variety of definitions associated with the marketing concept per se. We revert back to Kotler's approach to the marketing concept, and he and others essentially said that what marketing is all about is captured by the marketing concept, which is that core notion that resides at the core of what marketing is all about, and that is the marketing concept, and that is meeting the needs and wants of the consumer profitably, right? It's a two-part thing, meeting the needs and wants profitably. How important is that word profitably? How important is that? Big time important, right? To a large extent, and here, you know, here we can look at it sort of generally to meet the suggest that we're trying to meet some particular organizational aims. Profitability is one. But, you know, when we sort of look more at the conduct of business and we look at for-profit organizations and that kind of a thing, you know, or even not-for-profit organizations, there still has to be some modicum of profitability, right? So how important is profitability in the conduct of business? How important is it?
Very important,
Critically
crucial,
important, right? Why do we do business, generally speaking?
to make
Right?
money.
Right? A lot of people, you know, they're too weak or scared to say it. I'm not scared and I'm not weak to say it. I'll say it. What do we want to do in business? We want to make money.
Yeah.
Generally speaking. Generally speaking. Yes, we want to do it the right way and everything else, yeah. But ultimately, what do we want to do? What about those CEOs that turn their companies around and they become profitability and shareholder wealth, you know, expands and everything? These executives are rock stars, right? Everybody loves these guys, right? And they command multi-million-dollar, you know, compensation every year for doing precisely that, right? So how important is profitability? Very important. So we always, and that sort of brings me to another point, and that is, you know what, in business, in the conduct of business, and this goes for, you know, any kind of course that we would take here, and that is that we always want to think about the potential financial impact of everything we do, certainly in marketing. We're always thinking about the financial impact also. Everything has connected with it some kind of a price tag. Everything has some kind of a cost, typically financial costs associated with it. Everything has a cost, especially financial costs associated with it, right? So, you know, as marketers, you know, we want to rule the earth. We want to move the earth, right? As marketers, that's what we want to do. But very often we are precluded from doing these things, largely because resources available to us are limited, right? We are not operating with an infinite budget here, right? A very finite budget in which to execute our marketing efforts. So therefore, profitability in that concern is very important. And that's a key thing, right? So when people say, generally speaking, you know, they want to do this and they want to green that and they want to, you know, sustainability this and green that and do this and here and EV and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, that's all great. But you know, at the end of the day, what should we be thinking, must we be thinking about, right? And a lot of politicians, they lose sight of this, right? A lot of these political shysters, they lose sight of all this, right? But as business people, we don't typically lose sight of it. And that is, we need to recognize that everything has a cost associated with it, right? Really. Yeah, and like I said, politicians, they lose sight of it, right? Why do you think that most governments right now are operating in, you know, multi-trillion-dollar deficits and have multi-trillion-dollar debts right now nationally, right? Because politicians lose sight of all that, right? For a whole variety of reasons. But as business people, we can't. We have to do that. Yeah. So at any rate, yeah, that is key. Right. So getting back to the topic area, So what did we say? The marketing concept is what meeting the needs and wants of the consumer properly. Right. Furthermore, we then ask ourselves, another critically important aspect is how do we execute the marketing concept? In other words, how do we operationalize the marketing concept? In other words, how do we do it? How do we do it?
Market orientation.
Yes, market orientation, yeah. And here there are a variety of sort of flavors of market orientation. I like adopting sort of the most prominent one that sort of has sort of stood the test of time, and that is the Coley and Jaworski approach to market orientation. Yeah, 1990. Coley and Jaworski, 1990, as opposed to other ones like Narver and Slater, for example, 1990. Coley and Jaworski. And, basically what are we saying here? What then is market orientation about then? What is that?
How we operationalize marketing concept.
Right, perfect. And how do we do it then?
Marketplace information.
3 stages, right? Yes. And tell me the 3 stages then. Number 1 is?
Get marketplace information.
Perfect.
Bringing it to the firm and disseminating it.
Perfect. That's number 2. And the last one is? Reacting to. Beautiful, thank you. Well done. That's exactly right? Simple, right? Conceptually it's simple, right? Nothing complicated. So that's, and we will talk more about that momentarily. So that is key, absolutely. So that is key. Yeah. Okay? So then at this point then, just to repeat then, to recap, the core of marketing is captured by the marketing concept, and the marketing concept is meeting the needs and wants of the consumer profitably. How do we do it? How do we execute it? We execute it via the notion that we call market orientation. And market orientation is that 3-stage process. Get marketplace information, bring it into the firm, and disseminate it. Dissemination is moving around, and thirdly, reacting to that information. And so we bring up that information into the firm and then move it around, right? Pump it up to the C-suite so the executives know what's going on. They can, make decisions based on that. We move information to accounting guys, to the finance guys, to R&D, manufacturing. We pump all that information around, right? We disseminate it so that everybody knows what's going on. And we get that, right? Because as marketers, we're at that, we get all that information from the consumer. We are at the coalface, right? We are connected to the consumer. Marketing is very much an outward-looking discipline, right? Other ones, not so much. How about accounting? Are they outward-looking to the same extent? Absolutely not. Finance? No. HR? Management? No. No. Marketing, absolutely. So that is a key thing, right? And that's one of the key things, and I talked about this during the second video. One of the key things that differentiates marketing from other business disciplines. And that is, there are a variety of things, but most notably, as marketers, we are intimately concerned with and focused on understanding the consumer at a very deep psychological level, which is consistent with everything that I've spoken about the last 30 minutes, right? At a deep psychological level. So we dip into, psychology and sociology to understand the consumer as marketers. Do accountants do that? Nope. And that's not to speak badly about any of the other disciplines are great, I'm just saying it's different. Yeah, absolutely. We also talk about, the overall marketing strategy, right? And that was in the second video. And again, if you have not watched it, please do watch it. There's a lot of critical information that you must know in those videos, especially the second one, okay, if you have not watched it. Which I see some have not. So, when we talk about an overall marketing strategy, right, that for our purposes, we can think of an overall marketing strategy as being a series of building blocks, a series of functions that we must pursue in order to create an overall marketing strategy. And it all starts off with those marketing objectives, right? We determine the marketing objective, and then what do? We then determine who our target market is. And to do that, we dip into, consumer behavior and all psychological aspects associated with that. Segmentation, positioning, et cetera, to determine who are we gonna go after, right? That's key. And then what do? We engage in an environmental kind of a scanning, an environmental analysis, so that we can determine who the competitors are out there, right? And then we look at their strengths and weaknesses, we weigh up our strengths and weaknesses in relation to the competition that's out there, right? Which is important, right? We have to know who's out there, who's out there. I mean, business is a very cutthroat kind of a domain, you know? You think that Toyota would like to destroy Nissan? Big time.
Yeah.
You think Ford would love to destroy GM?
Yes.
In a heartbeat. They love, of course they'd love to destroy it, and then, you serve their market, all their customers, big time. You think Coke would like to destroy Pepsi? No doubt about it, for all the obvious reasons, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So, given that, it's very much a battlefield out there, right? So we need to know what the competitors are doing, right? Because they will come up and they will, slit our throats. So we need to know that. Right, and then what do we want to do? We then want to figure out what at its core are we trying to do then in terms of our overall strategy? In other words, we develop our core marketing strategy, right? And when we talk about a core marketing strategy, at its core, what are we trying to do? There are two major kind of orientations that we can adopt, right, in a very general sense. One is more of a growth, right? We want to grow something, whatever it happens to be. We try and sell more of something, or get more customers, whatever, right? Growth, very important from an entrepreneurial side, right? Growth. And or we can adopt more of a core strategy based on
Position.
absolutely right. Yeah. And if we're more kind of oriented towards positioning, we're looking more to maybe, we're looking a little bit more at what the competition is doing, competitor brands within the product category. What are they doing? Are we going head to head, or can we sort of differentiate it, right? So depending on how we do different things. Or growth, right? Growth is another key thing, right? And so to help us understand growth, we can sort of think in terms of that 2x2 matrix that I presented, right? Which was based on new or existing products and new and existing customers, yes. And so we look at that 2x2 matrix, we get the intersection of that, and that emerging out of that are four major strategic approaches based on growth, right? Did you capture that? So, what do we call, if we're trying to grow, we're trying to sell more Big Macs to our current customers. Existing product, existing customer base, right? Yeah, what do we call that?
Market development.
Penetration? Development? So there's that 2x2 matrix in there, okay? So go and capture that and know that, if you haven't already done.
Because it's a present product and a present, your regular customers, it is market penetration.
And so there are a variety of, there are four major strategic kind of approaches that we talked about there. So you need to go in, you need to know that. I think that's a very basic thing. So get in and do that. Right. What else did we do? What else should I talk about?
Marketing management.
Brand management, marketing management, brand management is essentially about all the decisions that are involved in everything that we just talked about. Yeah.
And the implementation of the marketing mix.
changing the nature of marketing, how the impact of technology and globalization and how consumers are changing, right? They are more demanding and hence.
So the way then, the key point here is that marketing is not a static kind of a discipline. It is very much a process type of a discipline. Always evolving, always changing, right? That's how we want to think of marketing. Right? So that sort of, I think, brings us to where we are today and right here and now. So today then, what we want to do then is build on the stuff that we talked about in the video. So again, if you have not watched the video, please do, because all the content in there is important and you're responsible to know. Number one. And number two, the course outline. If you have not read the course outline, get in there and read the course outline in detail. That's how we are going to execute the course, so you need to know that. And I guess the third point also, by the way, is the McGraw-Hill Connect assignments. Has everybody gotten in and are we moving forward with that okay?
Yeah.
The assignments, yeah, it's all pretty simple. The assignments, I mean, it's nothing more really than a low-level high school level. Ask your students. So yeah, we have not already done that. We've been there, due dates and times are all laid out there, it's all explained. Okay. Are there any questions on anything that I've spoken about, or anything with regard to the course, or the conduct of the course, or anything? Again, it's all easy and it's all sort of explained out there, right? So that's key. But make no mistake, you know, how the course will unfold is all contained in the course outline, right? And so in the strongest sense, I urge you, you know, to do well in the course again. You have to come to class, you want to be on time, take notes, we want to understand and know the stuff that goes down in class. We know the stuff that goes down in class, we're in good shape, right? And that's key. Right. Are there any questions at all? Points of clarification that I should offer? If you're thinking of anything, please do ask. Because if you're thinking of something, I promise you that other people are thinking the same thing. No? So let us then proceed then with, did I hear something groan? Is somebody groan? Did you groan? Meaning that you might have a question? No? Okay. So therefore, let us proceed then with the topic of today. And we want to talk about global marketing and market research, okay? Two important domains of marketing. We want to talk about those. And so today we will talk about that. We'll probably finish a little earlier today, I think, probably. Our finish time is 4 o'clock or 10, so we will likely finish before that today, and then we will pick it up the next class and finish off with this topic area next class. So, so we have this session and next session dedicated for this topic area. Right, so let's talk about global marketing. Shall we? And so to do that, then we want to talk about some key things here. We want to first of all talk a little bit about organization, international business. By the way, you guys, is this all your first semester here now? Are you guys all in the first semester?
Last semester.
You guys are all in your last semester?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. So you've done all the courses. This is one of the last courses that you are doing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. Okay, good. So this is different from the other section. The other section, and they're all first semester. So this is completely different. I have all the first ones, and now I have all the last ones. Okay. So, anyways, yeah. So we want to talk about it. So anyway, so you have all done the course in international business, right?
We're doing it in this semester.
You're doing it now? Everybody's doing it now?
Yes, but
Who's teaching international?
Jonathan Lee.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay. Okay, so what's international business then? I'm gonna take a break. You guys take over. You're taking it right now? Tell me what it is.
Taking business.
I'm waiting. Okay?
Taking business global.
Yeah, so what is taking the business globally, okay? Yeah? What else? What else? What
taking
is
the
it? I mean, you
goods.
started the course, you're in week 2, you must know what the course is all about, right? Or did he not explain it? Am I gonna have to have a conversation with Jonathan and say, hey, your students don't even know what the business discipline is? Now, right now, my students know what marketing is all about, we've spoken about that. So, the question then is, has Jonathan communicated what international business is as a course to you guys? That's the question. His reputation and my future conversation with him is on the line right now. Okay, go ahead.
So understanding the global cultures of the business, like the, as we mentioned about international business, so businesses at a global level. So every culture is different, right? So being in a company, having different kinds of employees of different cultures, it's possible that people are from different cultures, so everyone needs to know cultures from different.
Okay, so is it only about culture?
It's not only about the
It's a
culture,
cross-
but at the same time, it's about the politics, it's about like how the economy is growing, like, you know, the labor market, how it is. So each and every aspect actually, you know, that includes in the international business. We need to look at the broader aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Because if you really want to invest globally, then you need to carry out deep research on that country, like how are they functioning, what kind of business they are doing.
Yep.
So each and everything will be considered.
Well said. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did Jonathan talk about that? Yes or no? Do I have to have a conversation with him and jack him up and say, hey,
No, there was a case study about the Saudis culture like today. So like how culturally it is affecting the national business.
of course, okay, good, good. Okay, so we want to talk about that a little bit today anyway. From a marketing perspective, of course, we want to talk about international business. And then we want to sort of pivot away from that a little bit and talk more about global marketing, just for a few minutes, not for long. I mean, you can read about it in the textbook a bit, but we want to talk about global marketing. And then importantly, what do we want to do? We want to step out of that. No, I shouldn't say really step out of it, but we want to sort of extend that really into talking about market research, which is very important, right? So that's where we're going today and next class. Okay, so let's talk then, as that was a great, you guys, that was a great little input, so thanks for that. I hope everybody sort of hosted that for us. That was very good. So yeah, when we talk about international business, you know, I mean, it is a broad topic area, right? And I quite agree. You know, culture, personally, I've done quite a bit of I'm a marketing guy, but I've done quite a bit of international business myself in terms of research and that kind of thing. I've done some publications in it and everything else. So I'm a big believer in, you know, the study of international business, you know, within an educational environment. And yeah, culture is critically important and very fascinating too, by the way. It's personally very fascinating. So yeah, and it's important to understand culture too, isn't it? Right? Because what is business really all about? Business is all about what?
I mean, for example, like Cadbury when it came to India, so
Yeah.
we do
What came down to something?
like when they entered the
Indian.
Indian market.
Yeah.
So like we do have in our culture we do have like before starting something like our business or
Yeah.
something our work, we need to have something sweet. So what Cadbury did, like they marketed their their product as like before starting something, let's have something sweet.
Mhm.
So that is how they played with the Indian psychological aspect of the customers to enter the market of India.
So yeah, so I mean, culture is critically
Yeah.
important, right? Culture is critically and fascinating too, as I said. So yeah, it's critically. And why is it so important? Well, you know, business and the conduct of business is what? What is business all about to a large extent? It is very much a human organization, right? As humans, it is a human function. We as humans, we do it. Animals don't do it, really. Animals don't really do it. Humans, we do it. So therefore, it's very important. So we are subject to culture, we're subject to all of those kind of things, right, that we're talking about. So yeah. So yeah, and we'll talk more about that. So yeah, that is key. And so the first thing then that we want to talk about business is, you know, what about business? You know, before we even get into a formal definition of what international business is, we can ask ourselves, well, you know, building on, you know, these two good explanations that we've been talking about before, again, even stepping into, you know, fancy terminology, we can think of business, and let me read a little paragraph to you that I always like to read. And this is something that I pulled out of an article in Fortune magazine quite a few years ago, but I kind of like reading it to students just to sort of set the flavor and orientation a little bit. So let me read this to you. So the paragraph sort of reads as follows: a North American consumer can drive a car designed in Germany or Italy, which is assembled in Mexico from parts made from the US, from Japan, from China, from Canada, which were made from Korean steel and Malaysian rubber, which is filled with gas sold by BP, originating from Africa, which is transported by Greek shipping lines. Right? But really, when you consider all that, doesn't really that capture the essence of what doing business internationally is all about? Yeah, it really sort of captures the essence of it, right? And so, of course, now, I mean, everybody knows the essence of international business more so now than ever before, post-COVID, especially where we see the disruptions in supply chains and everything else, right? So now it's very, very obvious to the average consumer out there, which I would argue probably wasn't evident before, but it absolutely is evident, should be evident now, and that is how we are so now interdependent globally on the topic of business, right? You know, I would argue that a lot of consumers, you know, prior to COVID, you know, many of them, they just took everything for granted, right? They took for granted, they walk into a Walmart, they see completely stocked shelves, they see all that, they take all that for granted, right? You know? And so, you know, when they walk in, they don't see that selection anymore, or, you know, it's compromised, you know, relative to what it was before pre-COVID, as a result of the supply chain disruptions, well, you know, or when they go to make a car purchase, for example, typically, you know, you could walk onto any auto dealership's lot, and typically these lots of dealerships were full of vehicles, right? You just pick out a vehicle, not all of it's really changed, largely as a result of the changing supply chain. The impact on the supply chain certainly in the automotive sector. You know, what has had an impact on that, by the way? Automotive production, it's starting to come right now. One of the major problems in automotive production, by the way, sort of as an aside note, but one of the major problems was microchips, right? Microprocessor.
Yeah.
That was production. That was a major issue. It's starting to come right now, as well as others. So a lot of disruption in that industry too. But yeah, so yeah, now consumers they have to wait, like you know, and again it's starting to rectify itself. But I mean, they have to wait like X number of months if they want to buy a new car. And by the way, if they wanted to buy a new car, buying a new car now is like 20, 30, 40% more than it was like 5 or 6 years ago, right? Pre-COVID. So yeah, things are absolutely alive, so to speak. Right, so then we can ask ourselves the question then, you know, what is international business all about then? We sort of talked about that. So the point here though is that, you know, when we talk about what international business is all about, we recognize, and Jonathan should have explained this to you. I'm gonna have to chat with Jonathan. And, you know, we recognize that, you know, when we look at international business overall, there is a plethora of formal definitions of what international business is all about. Here, for our purposes, we want to sort of simplify it. We want to, you know, give you sort of an amalgamated, simple, hybridized version of what international business is all about. So how can we think of international business? This is how we can think of it. We can think of it essentially as the conduct of business across international boundaries. Right, which is consistent with what you were saying. Right? What's your name?
Milan.
Gila?
Yeah.
Gila? Yeah, good job. So it's basically the conduct of business across political boundaries, right? And so we can can drill into that in a little bit more detail and sort of finesse that a little bit by saying that really most of the definitions of what international business is, they all tend to agree on some fundamental tenets. And those fundamental tenets are indicated there. They all agree then that it's about a movement of products, and there's a key point too, by the way, when we talk about products here, in our marketing domain, a product can be a good and or a service. Okay? Where's that of order, everybody? A product can be a good and or a service. Okay? So yeah, we can refer to a service as a product, right? I mean, you go to the bank to get a mortgage, and what do they talk about? They talk about different mortgages, different products that you can purchase, right? You want to invest, $100,000 in a variety of financial instruments. You have a variety of financial products that are available for you to do that, right? It's all about services, right? So a product can be good and or a service. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about that movement, right? How does that movement of products work? It's a movement of products across international boundaries, right? Across international boundaries. That's what international business is all about. And then again, what is the entity that really executes all that and does all that and facilitates the conduct of international business?
The firms.
Right? The firm. The organization is the thing that does it. You can think conceptually then that the firm is that entity that straddles those borders, straddles the borders in order to effectively move those products across the borders. That's how we can think of it, right? And that's the essence of what international business is all about. So then I can even ask the question then when we talk about international business, is international business the sole purview of the big, large MNE? You guys know what an MNE is?
Multinational enterprise.
Right? Jonathan should have explained that to me. So MNE, multinational enterprise, right? Right? Is it the sole purview of the MNE, multinational enterprise, to do that? Yes or no? The answer is no. No, absolutely not. I mean,
It's more
with
than that.
technology and with, sort of the conduct of the way that we do business, you know what? All it takes is one person with a computer, and that one person essentially could be an international business. And certainly can conduct it that way. I had a next door neighbor years ago, who's away now, but Shelley. Shelley basically was one person in her home office, in her basement, with a storage room, an inventory room of products, and Shelley was an international business. She would take orders, fill the orders, pump them out, sell them using distribution. But, so yeah, the business can be one person, essentially. And technology facilitates all that. So yeah, it can be one person all the way up to the large multinational enterprise, right? So yeah, so that's what international business is all about. So that's how we want to think about it, right? It's really about the conduct of business across international business, international boundaries. So then we can ask ourselves, well, why do we want to do it? Why do we want to conduct international business? Well, frankly, for all of the reasons that we've been talking about for the last hour and a half, really, or hour. Why do we want to do it? Well, I would argue that for any business that wants to enhance its business, any organization that wants to enhance its business, that wants to flourish, that wants to grow, that wants to expand, guess what? They need to be thinking about international business. And that's just the way it is, one way or another. Whether it's getting products from an international source or selling, international or whatever, we recognize that that is critically important, right? So therefore, we look at the overall economy, right? We have to understand the overall global economy, which I would argue is really characterized by, fluidity. Things are very, very fluid, as we've been talking about, right? Parts moving across. I read to you an example that depicts the fluidity of the global economy, right? Everything is interconnected. Everything sort of flows across boundaries, right? Outsourcing, manufacturing, et cetera, right? R&D, all of this kind of thing, it is very much characterized by that fluidity, right? Furthermore, it also is what? Is it static? No, it's very, very dynamic. Very dynamic, highly interconnected, right? It's very dynamic, highly interconnected is another kind of characteristic of the global economy, I would suggest. And we also recognize that, accordingly, what else about the global economy? It represents opportunities. And if we're talking about opportunities, what's the flip side of that? Threats.
Threats.
There are potential threats also, right? So we need to recognize that. Opportunities that exist. Opportunities in terms of what are some of the opportunities that might stimulate a business to engage in international business?
Penetration into new
Market
markets.
opportunities, yep.
Policies and regulations which are in favor for doing more market penetration.
Capitalize on,
The talents which are easily accessible.
yeah, human resources, manufacturing, all that kind of cheap labor maybe,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff, right? Absolutely. What about some of the threats, right? Well, we've already talked about. How about the threats in terms of security, competitor
Political
threats, all that kind
turmoil.
of stuff, right? Everything associated with that. And so therefore it poses quite considerable unique challenges for the firm, right? Unique challenges for the firm. In terms of, for example, HR, cultural impact, everything like that. What about HR, right? You want to set up a manufacturing plant somewhere. What's the ownership configuration, right? If you're international business, you should be learning about that probably later. You'll be learning about ownership configurations, the different ownership, configurations for that multinational enterprise. You'll also learn, this you should, again, when I was teaching it decades ago, as we call it, different modes of entry, right? So if you want to enter another, foreign market, how do you do it? What kind of organization do you adopt in order to do that? Modes of entry, right? And there's a lot of things associated with that. And HR, right? How do you, get workers to come in? If you are manufacturing something, how do you get workers to come in? Where do you go to get workers? What kind of knowledge base and educational base do your workers need, right? Can you train them? How do you engage in recruiting a workforce where, the place that you might be setting up your manufacturing facility, the vast majority of workers might be illiterate, right? How do you do that? Well, that poses a problem in training problem. Right? So there are a whole lot of issues to deal with there, right? All part of the overall intricacies associated with the global economy. What about levels of corruption, right? I wrote a major paper quite 20 years ago on corruption. So corruption is an important thing too, right? Does corruption have an impact on, as we call it, FDI, foreign direct investment? Yes, it does, right? In fact, in my research, it shows that too, right? So yeah, it has a huge impact in this relation. So yeah, ethical considerations, right? Which is very important for North American firms too, because there are some regions of the world where, gift giving is kind of the way to do business, right? If you want to set up some kind of a manufacturing operation, or you want to do business in Russia, for example, in Moscow, you kind of sort of have to be giving gifts here and there, greasing skids, so to speak, and sort of greasing palms a little bit, right? Which is a problem because, North American corporate codes of conduct include that, whereas you're not allowed to. So how do you do that then, is the problem. The problem, that's sort of embedded in the cultural sort of expectations in a particular, how do you do that? If somebody is expecting some kind of a little solid bribe on the side, or some kind of gift, how do you do that? Or how about receiving gifts, right? So these are all concerns, right? Part of the problem to deal with here. So there are a lot of issues to deal with here. How important is international business here? How important is it? Well, for all the reasons we're talking about, it is critically important for the reasons that I've already mentioned, right? Any organization that really wants to flourish and grow in today's economy, they have to think about conducting international business, I would argue. I would also suggest that, all firms, to a greater or lesser extent, all firms are involved in international business in one way or another. And as I mentioned to you with respect to Shelley, even small businesses are involved in the conduct of international business. But for those organizations that can successfully engage in international business, a lot of benefits will accrue to those firms, right? A lot of benefits, financial benefits, market benefits, etc. Not the least of which, another sort of area of benefits are that, it really enables managers to keep abreast of advancing modern managerial techniques. Right? We don't often think about that. So what do I mean by that? Well, take for example something like, who here has heard of TQM? TQM or TQA?
Total quality.
There's an ISO standard that emerged out of that. But your total quality management, total quality assurance, that's right. Yeah. So now it's not really a hot. If we were having this class, maybe 20, 25 years ago, everybody would say, oh, it's TQA, it's the total quality. It was a hot button area, right? A number of decades ago. Now everybody here in North America just takes it for granted, right? But basically what it is, what is it? It's the notion then that every person within the organization has a commitment and has a responsibility to enhance quality. Everybody from the lowest worker on the assembly line to the CEO and the chairman of the board, everybody has a role to play in advancing quality within the organization. And that collectively is known as, total quality management, TQM. Again, now it's just a given. It's not even a thing really anymore. It's just a given now. But here's my point, and that is when it was a thing and there was a whole concept. And in fact, in about the mid-80s, late 80s, early 90s, consultants, consulting agencies, academics, they made their careers based on TQM, the whole thing, right? Again, not so much anymore. But what is it? Or rather, where did it originate, right? Well, it was really a Japanese managerial initiative, right? Japanese came out of Japan and was adopted by North America, right? So it really emerged out of Japan. And furthermore, is that the only thing that came out of Japan? Absolutely not. A lot of very cutting edge kind of managerial aspects came out of Japan and Japanese management, right? Take for example, and again, it's like a given now, North American manufacturing, but JIT, what's JIT? Just in time. And we all know what just-in-time delivery is right now, just-in-time inventory management. Well, guess what? Just-in-time really owes its conceptual origins to Japanese management, right? The notion then that, your inbound and input components for your assembly, when you start an assembly process or manufacturing run, your components, input components arrive just in time to begin the manufacturing process, right? And why is that important? Why is it good? Why has it grown in accordance, or why is it so important?
So you don't spend money storing.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Because the key thing to remember here, and just in the conduct of business overall, is that, When we talk about inventory in business, especially on the manufacturing side, inventory is very, very expensive, getting back to the importance of finance and cost. Inventory is a very, very expensive thing, right? And the problem with inventory is that, you know, it takes up a lot of resources, financial resources to develop the inventory, buy the inventory, and what is it?
Store.
It sits on the shelf, right? And when, you know, inventory is sitting on the shelf, guess what? It's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. And that, in business, we don't want that. We want anything that we purchase, we want it to be at work and making money for us, right? Inventory is, so we want to try to reduce inventory to a certain extent for that reason. And hence the importance of just-in-time delivery. Of course, it has problems too, but it's not a panacea. I mean, here in North America, one of the most busiest highways, in fact, is the 401, right, along the Windsor Ottawa corridor, right? One of the busiest highways in the world is the 401. Well, you know, you're on the 401, and you know, it seems like 95% of all the vehicles that are speeding along there at about 110, 120 kilometers an hour are what? Big 18-wheeler trucks, right? And what about those trucks? They carry the inventories for all of these major manufacturing organizations. So yeah, is it any wonder why on one of the world's busiest highways you have all these 18-wheeler trucks? Well, largely because it's just in time delivery and that kind of notion. So all the inventory is sitting on wheels in motion, right? So that's, so yeah, anyway, there are a lot of benefits here that can accrue to the firm. And then of course we can ask ourselves, okay, well, how does international business then differ from the conduct of global business, right? Well, we recognize then that, you know, global events have far-reaching impact on the conduct of business, right? And resultantly, there is greater complexity associated with the conduct of international business. We recognize then that absolutely, accordingly, it is more diverse because we have all of these challenges that we have to face. We recognize then that the external environment is more complex in terms of physical location. How do we get our parts from here to there, from there to here? How do we do all that, right? What about ownership? What about how do we want to do business somewhere, how do we do it, right? Well, if we want to go to China, for example, we want to set up a sole proprietorship, our own organization in China, can we do that? The answer is no, we cannot do that, because the government demands that we need to have a local partner, right, for example. So that's a constraint that we need to deal with, right? We need to get a local partner and set up some kind of typically a joint venture associated with that. What is, by the way, what is a joint venture when we talk about it? So you probably will learn about joint ventures. So here, I'll give you a leg up. This, when you talk about joint ventures with Jonathan, tell him this and it will impress him, okay? So a joint venture, what is a joint venture? A joint venture essentially, used extensively in international business, but it's basically where you have typically two, could be more, but typically two organizations that come together and they form a third entity. And that third entity, it's third standalone business, which is owned by, it's called a joint venture. And you know, so you have these different ownership configurations and all that kind of thing. So that is essentially what a joint venture is. So you tell that and then you can say to them, they'll say to you, wow, where do you guys know all that? You guys are so knowledgeable in international business, right? And then you can, what are you going to say? What's your answer to that? Yeah, that's right. That's the answer. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so so we also recognize that internal concerns are very salient also, right? How are we going to staff it? Where are we going to get our workers? How are we going to train? All those kind of things, right? What about management issues, right? Do we export our managers to another location to run the operation, or do we hire local managers? These are questions that have to deal, need to deal with, right? And of course, when we have our workers that go to another nation to work, what do we call those guys? We call them expatriates. Expatriates will work there. We also recognize that government impact has a far-reaching impact also. Governments have different areas of their economy that they want to stimulate or shut down or whatever. So government regulation is quite extensive and needs to be considered very carefully in the conduct of international business. And so all the while we recognize that there's greater uncertainty overall. Greater uncertainty, greater risk, and I'll talk more about that momentarily. So I like to think, and this is just me, I like to think in terms of international business, in terms of framing the overall domain of international business along four major dimensions to help us understand it, and I will share this with you. And that is, we recognize that there is greater risk, right? So the whole notion of risk, i.e. uncertainty, is very key, right? For all of the reasons that we are talking about, risk is higher, right? Ownership, workers, movement, all that stuff, right? Uncertainty, for all the obvious reasons, is higher. So risk is key, right? Considerably greater risk than purely domestic business, right? For all the reasons we're talking about, right? Culture, we talked about culture a little while ago, has a huge role to play, right? What is desirable in one area might not be desirable in another area, right? Especially from a marketing perspective, right? Because, concerns about communicating in different regions of the world, right? That are subject to different cultural standards, right? In North America, we have an approach to sexual imagery, for example, which might be different from, say, the approach that the French in France have with regard to sexual imagery, which might be different from, say, the potential usage of sexual imagery in, say, Saudi Arabia, right? If that is what we want to do, right? So we need to know all of that, right, is the key thing. So, yeah, and of course there are different legal frameworks, and security is a key thing, et cetera, right? I mean, there's a friend of mine who worked for Barrick Gold, and they set up quite a few decades ago now, they set up a gold producing mine in Suriname, in South America, former Dutch Guiana, in South America, one of the world's poorest nations. So one of the problems here is that, they have it gated and everything else, they have these spaces, they go down and work there and run it. And one of the major problems that they had was security, right? Because people who were living in poverty would try to break in and steal stuff and do all kinds of bad things within the content. So security is a key thing, right? So we need to be well aware of all that. Terrorist threat, port security, all those kind of things are critically important, right? As we know. We also recognize that political issues are of greater salience also, right? Political issues, different forms of governance, doing business in a theocratic nation like Iran, for example, is considerably different from doing business in, say, Ireland, which is different from doing business in, say, Georgia, right? So we have these differences that we have to be well aware of, right, if we are to do it. So there are different goals and different policies. Typically, we see that there is greater greater political and government involvement in the conduct of international business, both in the host country and the home country, right? So we have all these things going on, right? Various forms of taxes, taxation, tariffs, duties, et cetera, right? Which are related to economic aspects, right? Economic complexities of particular importance here. So how can we mitigate some of that risk? How can we reduce the unknowns associated with it? Well, we gather information, develop it into intelligence, right? So intelligence, learning about everything that we're talking about in the whole host country is critically important, so we need to do that. Right? And again, consistent with what I was saying, what is the ownership configuration, right? Can we simply move in and set up shop in another nation? Well, yeah, sure. Some nations we can, others we can, right? Do we outsource it to another organization? Can we use contracting? Can we contract it to another organization? Can we use a form of a contractual arrangement called franchising? Can we franchise out? Or do we need to have a local partner? In which case we might want to think about either a partnership or a joint venture. So these modes of entry are important considerations. Right? Ownership is key. And of course, on the economic side, we're always concerned about the financial impact, right? The impact of financial markets and respective monetary policies and exchange rates, right? Exchange rates, very, very important, right? How countries manage their exchange rates, right? Whether it's just a normal floating one or whether it's pinned to, the US dollar or however it works, right? So these are all key concerns, economic. And of course, we recognize then that what is that organization that fundamentally executes everything that we're talking about? What is it? It is the global firm, right? That does it. So as I mentioned to you before, when we think of the organization, the firm, executes that bridging kind of a function, right? It straddles those boundaries, right? Between the host country and the home country. That's how we can think of it, right? We can also recognize that, those global organizations are absolutely agents of change, as I like to call them. What is an agent of change? Another thing we talked about. Right? An agent of change. So what's an agent of change? Yeah, go ahead, guess. You can or you can't guess? You can. Go ahead. Are you an agent of change? What's an agent of change? So it's a big word here, there's not a set. We can think of an organization as being an agent of change. Think about an organization that goes to a business. Let's think about a Canadian manufacturer. I'll give you a real life example. 20 years ago or so, a furniture manufacturer out of Manitoba called Pallister Furniture decided to set up a major furniture manufacturing facility in Mexico. A whole lot of right? So they set it up over there. Well, look at it this way. What did Pallister, for example, and other GM and other organizations, what do they need to do in those market states? Say Mexico, what do they need to do? They need to hire, and they need to recruit workers in their manufacturing facility, right? So what about those workers that they bring in? They need to train the workers to do something, so right off the bat, essentially peasants with zero skills, all of a sudden are learning some skills, and these folks who ordinarily are earning like zero, guess what? All of a sudden they're actually earning money. So what does that do at a macro level? It enhances overall income, it reduces the lower class somewhat, reduces the polarity of the rich and poor because you have the poor that are now starting to earn more money and that kind of thing, right? And what facilitates all that? The organization, and so what does that do? It changes the dynamic. And it's with that in mind then that I claim that a major kind of aspect associated with that multinational enterprise is agent of change, and that's what I mean by that. Certainly, we always need to consider cost-benefit analysis, as I was saying before, right? Now, the problem here is that very often, the benefits are often very unclear, right? So it takes a very dedicated and deliberate approach in terms of, within a framework of cost-benefit analysis, in order to figure out whether it's something that should be done or not. And certainly, there's always that risk-taking kind of capability, right? That requires all the reasons we talked about. So yeah, there are a lot of things, right? What about the stability? What kind of agreements and trade agreements? What about some of the barriers to trade that exist, right? And there are barriers to trade that are set up, right? What about trade agreements, right? Now, here in North America, what is a major agreement that really drives much of what we do, our economic activity within North America here? What is the
NAFTA.
major trade agreement?
NAFTA.
NAFTA? Yeah, yeah. Which was formed in about, the late
Years
eighties,
ago.
I would say, late eighties. NAFTA, North America Free Trade Agreement. But, about 5 years ago, it was reformed, reshaped, renegotiated to the current term. And the current agreement is what we call USMCA. Yeah, the US. Who said that? Did you? Who said that? Yeah, USMCA. Right? Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that later. So yeah, agreements, population differences, resources, is a key thing, which could be a major impetus for going to a particular region, right? To capitalize on available natural resources, possibly, which our home country might not have, as well as get those resources and that kind of thing. Yeah, labor availability and corruption, as I said, is a key thing too, right? So there are a whole lot of things that concerns us. So fundamentally then, with all these things going on, then why would we want to pursue international business then? Well, there are a variety of reasons, and we can distill all of those reasons into 3 major categories as to why we might want to go to another country and engage in international business. One is what we call market reasons, right? Market. What is happening in our home nation versus what it might be happening abroad, right? Market reasons. So what do I mean by that? Well, take for example the product life cycle, right? What is a product life cycle? Anyone? What is a product life cycle?
The complete process of the conception of the production of the product to the marketing, like the marketization of the product.
So the notion here, when we talk about a product life cycle, and you will read it later in the course, and you'll read it in the book, they describe it quite well. The bottom line here is that when we talk about product life cycle, which is very important in marketing, by the way, essentially the notion here is that a product has its own kind of a life cycle. And so the notion then is we're suggesting that a product has an analogous, similar kind of life cycle, product life cycle, similar life cycle that human or living organisms have. Namely, that we have introduction, we have growth, we have maturity, and then what do we have? Where I'm feeling in person right now. Yeah. And so the bottom line here, with these 4 major stages, what does that mean to us? That means then that for us as marketers, we typically seek to do different things at each one of those 4 major stages. In other words, if we're introducing a product, we do different things from a marketing perspective from, the things that we would do if we were, if our product was in a deep one. So the bottom line here is that market forces, as dictated by product life cycle, can have a huge role to play. Take, for example, beer and brewing, if you look at, we will not do it now in this case, but if you look at a major Belgian beer called Stella Artois. Stella Artois, the market for Stella Artois in the home nation of Belgium is essentially the back end of maturity into decline, essentially. Back end, it's all saturated, right? They can't really grow it anymore because everybody that is buying it are buying it, right? Essentially. So what do they need to do then? What do they need to do? They need to look outside of their home nation to other international markets in order to try to sell their product. So they would typically then, in this case, what they would look at, global markets where here in the glue industry is on the growth side, right? And where is that? Africa is one, sort of on the growth side of Africa, so that is one potential market. The African, generally the African market, Asian is another key thing, Eastern European, these markets are sort of on the growth side, as far as brewing goes. So they would look to those markets. So market, that's a key thing. How about economic aspects, right? Purely economic aspects in terms of a motive. When we talk about this, we're talking about trying to capitalize on financial arrangements, yeah? And so here, economic impetus for moving manufacturing offshore, for example, setting up another international business might be to capitalize on cheap labor, for example, right? And why is that important? We reduce labor costs, it reduces the expense, we reduce the expense, what does that do? It sort of enhances profitability, right? Because we remember when we talk about, from an economic or financial perspective, we look at coming back to profitability. Again, what is profitability all about? Profitability is all about that difference, if you will, between revenue and expenses. Right? So we can enhance profitability, that delta, if you will, along several major ways, right? You can keep expenses the same, enhance revenue, that increases the delta, makes it more profitable. Or we can keep revenue the same and lower our expenses. And that, again, enhances the delta.
Austerity.
Profitability, yeah. Well, we can do both, really. So those are the economic benefits. So we move our manufacturing to Mexico, we dramatically reduce our labor costs, that'd be good, right? But then, of course, transportation, a whole bunch of other, hence the importance of cost benefits. And then lastly, what about strategic reasons, right? There might be strategic reasons why we might want to move into other countries, right? There are a whole lot of reasons why we might want to do that. So, we might want to capitalize on distinctive capabilities within an industry, right? Or we might want to capitalize on another strategic reason, capitalize on first mover advantage, right? First mover advantage. That is when we are the first to enter a particular market with our brand and our product. That's what we call a first mover advantage, right? From a strategic perspective, right? And do you like that as marketers? Typically, you love it. Yeah. And ideally, then, what are some of the benefits that we have, by the way, with a first mover strategic advantage like that we call sort of in marketing, we call it a pioneer advantage. Pioneer advantage. They're the first to enter the industry or the market in a particular region. It's called a pioneer advantage. Or it's also sometimes related, we call it radical innovation. And radical innovation is when not only do we enter a new product category, we basically build new, right? That's basically what the smartphone was with Steve Jobs. Right? Before Steve Jobs, the smartphone basically invented the smartphone per se. Henry Ford essentially invented the automobile, and what did that do? Not only was it the automobile, but it also spawned and invented a whole new industry. That's what we call it, radical innovation. So anyway, why is that important from a strategic perspective? Why is that good and why is that attractive? Because, yeah, go ahead.
Sir, you get the chance to mold the consumer psyche.
Absolutely.
So you set the precedent and that shapes the future of the industry and where it's going.
Yep, absolutely, yep, which is very attractive, right?
Yeah.
Potentially very lucrative for us also.
For-
And so from a psychological marketing brand management perspective, what are we doing then? Essentially, one of the major benefits then is that in the consumer's mind, which is what we're interested in the consumer's mind, the product, our brand, becomes synonymous with the product category. And that is great. That's exactly what we, so when the consumer thinks of
Kleenex.
tissues.
It's Kleenex. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or when they think of, making photocopies, so let's make,
Xerox.
yeah, let's make about 20 Xerox, copies of that. Xerox, brand, Kleenex, brand, I'm sorry, were you saying?
I said the same thing, I said Xerox.
Xerox, yeah, Xerox. Yeah. So this is where, you know, a brand name becomes synonymous, and, yeah, we love it, it's a result of the pioneer. Okay, so, let us now just sort of pivot out of that a little bit and talk about global marketing. Let's spin this a little bit for a few minutes and talk about marketing. You want to take 5 minutes? No? Why not? Okay, so let's take 5 minutes. It won't take too much longer than that, I think, because you know, the longer the break, the more time that we will take to come back in. So we minimize the time. So the time right now, let's come back at about 8 minutes before the hour. 8 minutes before the hour.
Brother, I'm not Bandur, ঠিক আছে? I am Harambeda gorilla. I'll punch back.
It's good.
I know.
Punch it back, that's good.
We agree then that the conduct of international business is international business across boundaries. What do you think global marketing is all about? Right, exactly, right? So that's essentially what it is. So global marketing essentially is, you know, when we talk about those extension, if you will, of marketing efforts across those international efforts. That's what global marketing is all about. So the notion here then is that there's similarities and differences, but we need to be concerned about that. And so therefore, when we talk about global marketing, then the key thing is that consistent with everything that we have spoken about then, when we talk about global marketing, we need to be very, very cognizant of those country differences. And so really, when we talk about global marketing, here we're talking about, you know, global marketing management. And so essentially, we're concerned about that marketing program, if you will. The marketing program is the marketing program, obviously marketing mix, and the marketing mix is the 4P framework, okay? So we're concerned about what about the marketing mix in another country, right? Are you with me here? So the decisions that we make as marketers and internationally, here's the point, parallel those decisions that we would make domestically. They parallel those kind of decisions. So yeah, same kind of decisions we have to make, but just different flavors and considerations associated with each. That's the point, okay? So the notion here is that the international context is characterized by everything we've been talking about over the last hour. So that informs the kind of decision-making process that we have to engage in when we're establishing that marketing program. And so the key thing then, like I said, The key issue sounds like a good little exam question here too, by the way. That's my good little exam question. What is an essential kind of key issue here associated with the conduct of global marketing? It really hinges on this notion of standardization versus customization. Standardization versus customization is the crux of global marketing here. So what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean by that is this. To what extent, essentially, to what extent do we need to customize our marketing program, our 4Ps? To what extent do we need to customize our 4P framework? To what extent do we need to customize our marketing program or our marketing mix to the market that we want to go into versus standardize it relative to our domestic market? In other words, can we basically adopt, you know, a 4P framework in another market, the same 4P framework as we adopt in our home market? That's the question. There's no yes or no. That's the question, right? In other words, do we need to standardize it? Can we standardize it? Or do we need to customize it? That's the key thing. Depends, right? It all depends on where we go. Sometimes we might need to, other times we might not. That's the question, okay? That's the concern. Furthermore, we can also say, okay, if we need to customize it, to what extent then carrying this customization versus standardization notion further, if we go into multiple markets, to what extent then can we standardize our markets, our external markets? Can we standardize all of our international markets, or do we need to customize each one? So it depends, right? It depends. And so the point that I'm making here is that everything that I've just described hinges on this notion of standardization versus customization. And that's the core. When we think about it, that's the consideration. That's the kind of thinking that we bring to bear when we try to figure this stuff out. Are you with me? So, international, global marketing, about, what did I say? So if you see like a little exam question along that way, you will know what it's about. Are you with me? Right?
Professor, if you don't mind, can you give one example, like with the help of organization? Can you give one example for?
Okay, well, let's take, for example, if we want to, your home country, McDonald's. Can we sell beef Big Macs in Delhi? Right?
No.
Obviously not. So what do we need to do? We need to customize our product of that product. We need to customize that product for the Delhi market, right? Versus, you know, opening up a McDonald's in another one in, Leamington versus one that we've opened up here, right? Same thing, we don't have to customize anything. Or if we open up a Tim Hortons in Georgia, do we need to customize our product offering there? No. McDonald's, do we need to customize, an essential core flagship brand, our Big Mac in Delhi? Yeah, obviously we can't sell beef for it. So customization, that is the key thing, right? That's the key thing. So, if we recognize that, then, we need to plan more, right? So planning is certainly more extensive. We recognize that, what are we trying to say? Yeah, planning is certainly more deliberate. We have to recognize the role of culture. As we were talking about before, we've already emphasized the role of culture. Critically important. Culture is human. Conduct of business is a human endeavor. We need to figure it out. Recognize it. And we need to, speaking of culture and the conduct of international business too, here's another thing that we should raise with Jonathan also, right? If you have not heard of this term called ethnocentricity, that's a hot button topic area in international business too. Ethnocentricity. Ethnocentricity is something we want to avoid. What is it? That being ethnocentric, practicing ethnocentricity is something we want to avoid. It's not a good thing. It's a bad thing we want to avoid. And what is it? It's basically when we look at other nations through the same lens and the same way we would be conducting our own domestic surveys. So quite obviously, we could say, okay, well, we're going to open up a shop in Delhi and let's just open up and offer the same kind of things that we offer here at home in Delhi, right? Boom. What's that? That's being highly ethnocentric, right? Because we are automatically assuming that the Delhi market will behave and want the same thing as our home market, and that is not correct, right? Take the beef thing as an example, right? So those are key things, right? So that is a key. So we need to know that, right? If we are, if we're a lingerie, manufacturer, can we put pictures of, seductive lingerie up in Tehran? Can we?
No.
Not if we want to live. Right? For example, I'm being facetious, but you get my point, right? But, I mean, we could do it here in Windsor. So, we might make that mistake, around, we might make, if we are overly ethnocentric, we want to avoid it. So ethnocentricity is a key thing we need to be very, very sensitive to both kinds of, it's all based on culture and politics and everything. So that's a key thing, right? That's a key thing. So yeah, it's certainly more complex for all of those reasons. Okay, so one of the key things that I mentioned then is this, and that is, one of the key things that we had mentioned then is that how can, okay, so we agree then that the conduct of international business is more complex. Why is it more complex? Greater risk. What's risk? Unknowns. Greater number of unknowns, right? So we recognize that. And how can we mitigate that? How can we reduce those unknowns? How can we reduce unknowns? By getting information, right? By getting information. And when we talk about getting marketplace information, that should ring a bell.
Market orientation.
That is what?
Market orientation.
The first step of market orientation, exactly right. So, market orientation, the first step, getting marketplace information. Why? Especially in an international context, it reduces the unknowns, and that's the thing. Even in a domestic environment, right? We need to get that marketplace information. We need to get it, understand it, execute it, and make it, right? So, how do we do that? How do we do that? Right? Sounds good to say it. How do we do it? This is how we do it. How's that for a segue into this? Pretty skillful, huh? That's skillful. Slide into the research area. So yeah, we do it through market research. So we want to spend the next half hour or so, 20 minutes talking about research, and we'll finish it off next class. So we're on the back stretch now of today's class, the home stretch. Is that good? Why is it good? You want to keep on talking about it? Okay, so market research. So what is market research all about? What is market research all about? Well, you know what? Just like every other major topic area, we want to put a stake in the ground, and we want to understand exactly what this topic area is moving forward. And to do that, we need to define it, right? Because it's just like everything else in marketing, right? If you ask 10 people to define something, you will get 20 different answers. Right? So we want to make sure that we understand what it's all about. Right? And market research is one example. So what is market research? Well, like we do generally for other major topic areas, we look to the AMA, and the AMA very nicely defines it, and essentially, and I will sort of modify the words a little bit just to convey the concept. And the concept here is that market research is basically this. It is establishing that connection with the consumer via the passage of information. That's what market research is all about. So what does it do then? I'll say it again. It basically, market research connects, it links the customer to the marketer through information. Easy peasy, right? That's what market research is all about. So what did I just say? It links the customer to the marketer through the passage of information. Right? So that's how we can think of market research. And yeah, they're fancy words. Let me read the fancy kind of wording to you. Okay, so what they say, same thing, they just pack in more fancy words, but what they say is that it is the function which links the consumer customer to, and the public to the marketer through information. Okay, which is basically what I just said. So that's how we can think of it, right? I would say it again. It's that linkage, if you will, between the customer and the marketer. That's what market research is all about. So fundamentally then, if that's what it is, what does it do? What are some of the major functions then of that passage of information? Well, we could be doing it, broadly speaking, to scan, to scan things. If we want to go into a particular market, Delhi market, for example, we will want to know, the potential customer base, how many customers, and, all that kind of thing, So scan it. We would want to assess risk, how much risk and uncertainty is associated in that. We can do so by getting information, right? And of course, if we're already there and we're already doing things, domestically also, it also allows us to monitor things, to monitor our marketing program. And like I said, when I talked about monitoring the brand health, we need to monitor the brand health, right? How is our brand doing? What's happening with the brand health? And so that is a key thing. So those are three very major functions. So what are some of the reasons why we might want to do it? Here's a partial list. I mean, I would argue probably an infinite list. But certainly, forecasting is key. We want to forecast demand, forecast how big the market might be, forecast sales, forecast a whole bunch of stuff, right? Especially when we're, engaged in a new product introduction and that kind of thing. But we want to, forecasting. We could be, engaged in research to modify existing products, or better define the product, or change it somehow, that kind of thing. We might engage in research to help us solidify our marketing strategy, and it will certainly inform the formulation of our overall marketing strategy. And I talked to you moments ago about what the overall marketing strategy is. It will help us to understand what the competition is doing, right? We talked about that. So understanding who the competition is, what they're doing, and their strengths and weaknesses. How do we do that? Through research, right? Helps us to engage in that important marketing thing that we call segmentation. Segmentation, where we break down that mass market into identifiable groups. And then once we break it down into those groups, what do we do next? We then determine what group, i.e. what segment, we want to focus our marketing efforts on. And at that point, what do we call that segment?
Target
market. Target audience, target market. Exactly. Yeah, and it helps us to understand consumer behavior, right? Consumer behavior. And relatedly pricing. Sort out our pricing aspects and other keys. So, as we think about marketing research,
there are two fundamental ways that we can sort of approach it in order to help us understand and frame it in our minds here. And there are two fundamental questions we can ask ourselves: the how and the why. Why do we do it? And then how do we do it? Two fundamental questions. So when we ask ourselves the why, the answer to the why comes from examining the functions. When we ask ourselves the how, the answer to that comes from examining the techniques that we can use. So more specifically then, as we seek to sort of frame everything that I've talked about, it sort of looks like this. And this is a nice way of sort of framing marketing or consumer research. We can look at the why and the how. You know, the why is about the various functions that we could adopt, and the how rather looks at the various techniques that we have available to us and methodologies. So here we see that. The techniques, surveys, experiments, observation, we'll put that on the sideburn and we'll circle back and talk more about that in just a while. But first, let's set up a foundation and look at the why. And specifically, let's look at some of the major functions as to what we might want to do here. Okay, so the first one is exploratory. Exploratory, the first major function. So what is exploratory research all about? Well, here's the thing. We have to recognize that that world out there, that marketplace out there is pretty murky, pretty confusing, consistent with everything we're talking about. So very often in research, we don't even know the right questions to ask because everything is so confusing out there. So what do we need to do? We need to engage in exploratory research in order to, here's the key terminology, in order to better define the research domain. So exploratory research enables us to better define the research domain. That's what exploratory research does for us. So what does that look like then? Well, let me give you a personal example of a research stream that I started. I like to share this with students that I started a few decades ago at this point. And that is this notion of what I call consumer deviance. Consumer deviance. So in the notion of deviance is very, very popular and well established and well researched in the domain of sociology. So there's a very well established literature, sociology of deviance, within the sociology discipline. But deviance has received virtually no treatment within consumer behavior marketing. So I wanted to look at that. So here's the thing, brand new, nobody's done it before. So what did I do then? Well, it's a brand new thing. So what I did then is that I got a bunch of, I used as a sample group MBA students. This was when I was at the Ivy Business School. So I got a bunch of MBA students, as a couple hundred of them, that I used as subjects. And I asked them open-ended questions. What is deviance? What does deviance mean to you? What are some examples of deviance? How would you define deviance? You know? Some questions like that, maybe about 6 or 7 questions. Paper, pencil, ask them the questions, and they just wrote. And then I went through all that and analyzed it. So what am I doing here? I am engaged in exploratory research in order to understand that domain. And that's what was happening there. And that was very, very useful for me too, by the way, because it enabled me then to solidify my conceptualization, my definition of consumer deviance. It allowed me to define it, and it allowed me, well, I theoretically defined it. I defined it based on theory, but it allowed me to conclude that my theoretically derived conceptualization of deviance was in sync with the understanding of the general consuming public, and that was a key thing. Yeah. Right? So, exploratory research. It helps us to what? Better define, better understand that research domain, because sometimes You know, things are so murky, we don't even know the right questions to ask, right? Which is an important consideration, right? And it's an important consideration for consumers also. And it relates to the extent to which consumers will, seek information when they are seeking information. I hope you guys are listening to me here, because I guarantee you there'll be exam questions on this. So I hope you are listening to me here closely. So it really relates to, the extent to which consumers will seek information also. Right? This whole motion of seeking information. So yeah, it helps us to understand from a marketer perspective, and it relates to the extent to which consumers will seek information too. So these are important things, right? Right, so exploratory is key. So, in a nutshell, what's exploratory? Tell me.
Research domain.
Tell me.
It's a research
What's
domain.
exploratory?
So it's
I'll just explain it, so just repeat it back to me.
yeah, it's just a research domain where you don't know, you're not sure of the exact questions to ask, so.
So it helps us to understand the research here.
Better
Yeah.
define.
Whether you're going in sync with customers or not. Like,
Yeah,
you
well, it
get to
helps
know
us,
their perspective.
that was an example, but the bottom line is that it helps us to understand the research domain,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so I hope that's clear. Okay, so that therefore brings us to another major function, and that is descriptive research, right? Descriptive. So here, this is especially important in segmentation. Segmentation. So here, the notion then of descriptive function of description and descriptive research is where we want to describe the target population somehow. So let me give you an example to illustrate that. And that is, if we are thinking about opening up a franchise in Windsor for, let's say, big and tall men's clothing, wouldn't we want to describe the potential segment, the potential population that we are going to focus on in Windsor? Wouldn't we want to describe that segment in terms of how many men there are, how tall they are, how many men are taller than, say, 6'2", for argument's sake, how many men weigh more than, say, 300 pounds, how many men, have particular measurements and that kind of, we want to describe all that. And we could engage in research in order to do that. Right? We need to do that if we're thinking about pursuing a business opportunity. And so we would engage in research in order to answer those questions. And so what does that mean then? What kind of research are we engaged in?
Descriptive.
Yeah. So that is key. Which brings us then to the third major function, and that is causality. Causal research, right? Causal. And so guys like me, researchers like me, especially on the consumer side, we are hyper-focused on this whole notion of causality. Causality. Very, very important. So the question then becomes, what is causality? Again, this is all so important what I'm saying. You may not understand it, it's important. So I'm telling you that it's important. So I hope you believe me. And why is it important? Because, if I say that things are important, guaranteed you're going to be seeing exam questions on it, right? So I would strongly urge you to capture this and understand it and pay attention, right? Just saying. So, causality. What is causality all about? Very critically important marketing. It is simply this. Does A lead to B? Does variable A result in variable B? Does A lead to B? Does B result from A? Stated alternately, does a change in one variable result in a change in another variable? That's what causality is all about. So let me give you some real life examples. From the videos, for those of you who watched them, that you looked at, video number 1, we talked a little bit about it today, that those price tags were what color? They were red. And so why as marketers and do we use red? Because red is an attention-getting color. In other words, you, from a perceptual perspective, you present red to a person, presumably, you present red, and what does that result in? What does it cause? It causes an arousal. It causes, it's a stimulating color, and it causes arousal, the color red does. Conversely, you could show the consumer pinks, or greens, or blue hues, and what does that do? The opposite, those are very calming colors, right? All important, you know, depending on what we're trying to do. If we're marketing a holiday resort, you might think about using those kind of colors. If we're trying to capture the consumer and say, hey, this is on sale now, hey, this is a great, and you might want to be using those kind of reds, right? So red is, so what are we saying? Red leads to neurological arousal. Red leads to arousal. Ease of use, this notion of what we call ease of use, right? We can measure ease of use. Technology, computer ease of use. Well, guess what? The greater the ease of use, the greater the satisfaction, right? Ease of use results in heightened satisfaction, causes increased satisfaction. And it also causes an increased likelihood of usage. What is that? Causal relationships. Let me give you another example. Here's an example. I always like to give this example. Take, for example, this situation. We have this notion in criminology and crime called a break and enter, right? B&E, called B&E. What is a B&E? A B&E, a residential B&E, is where bad people will break into a house, steal stuff, break and enter, right? Okay, so the higher the number of B&Es, the higher the number of ice cream sales. Everybody shaking their head. Yes, it's true. What I just said is not it's true. The higher the number of B&Es, the higher the frequency number of ice cream sales. It's true.
Because people get depressed or something. Ice cream.
Right? Does that make sense?
It's not linking, Professor. Is it because the break-in happened, I'm depressed, now I'm gonna have ice cream? That's to soothe my mind.
After you break into a house, you're hot, you're sweaty, you want to relax, and you go and buy ice cream, right?
Maybe even associated with a well-off neighborhood where people can afford to buy more ice cream.
Possibly. So the bottom line here, what I just said is absolutely correct. The higher the number of B&Es, the higher the number of the ice cream sales. So the question then is that, is there a causal relationship between these two variables? Is there a causal relationship? One goes up, the other one goes up, absolutely. Absolutely. So if one goes up, the other one goes up, and one goes down, the other one goes up. It's got to be a causal relationship, right? Right?
Not really.
Not really.
Wrong.
Not really.
It's correlated.
Causal
Because
untrue
it's not
correlation.
So what we are referring to here is that one variable absolutely is related to another variable. They absolutely are related. However, they are not causal. They are not causal. They are correlated in other words. There's a correlational relationship, absolutely. In fact, a very strong correlation.
Yeah.
If we were to measure the correlation, you know, it would be very, very high. You know, if we use, the correlation, we normalize that, and say the correlation would probably be upwards of 0.95. Very, very strong, I would think. So very strong. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about correlational relationship, not to be confused with causality.
Causal.
Causality does a, yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just trying to clarify,
Yeah.
but then your concluding statements is really changed my mind. So based on the example you gave about the ice cream and break and even, so does that mean we can say something like the lower the weather gets,
So,
the higher the
so let me finish the example then, yeah.
Thank
So
you.
basically what we're saying here is that, is there a causal relationship? No, there is not a causal relationship. Is there a correlational relationship? Yeah, absolutely, correlationally. Statistically, absolutely, there's a relationship. One goes up, the other goes up, yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Correlated.
So then it begs the question then, well, what is going on here? What is going on? Well, I'll tell you, what is going on is the action of what we call a spurious variable. And that spurious variable is something that's sort of hidden and it affects something else. And what is that here? That is weather. It's warm weather. Right? So when warm weather, when it's nice out, the warm weather, higher number of B&Es, and, yes, you see, so the thing is that, what does that all mean to us here, as master's students, as, university master's students? And one of the key things that I always push my students and emphasize this with my students, and that is, you know what, you just don't want to accept stuff, right? You just don't want to look at things and not think about it. That's what yard birds do. You don't want to do that, right? You want to think about things.
Question.
You want to think about things, you say, hold it, does this really make sense? You know, is there really this causal relationship? Because I'll tell you, we look at the media, reporters, journalists, and that kind of a thing, and 95% of these guys, they just look at two variables and they say, oh,
Yeah.
this causes that, they write it up and they report, and that's it, right? Well, a lot of them, no disrespect, but a lot of them are not that smart to start with, and 99% of them have like zero statistical or research kind of training anyway, so they don't know. And more importantly, journalists out there, they have their own hidden agenda anyway. It's like, conveying facts to the people and conveying information is not even part of their agenda. Their agenda is to do whatever, sell more newspapers or whatever. So yeah, that's a domain that I particularly don't like, by the way. So what does that mean? That means that, when we look at media reports and that kind of thing, we need to think about it and say, hold on. Liz Giovanni is writing and saying, look, that really makes sense, right? Well, we can do it when we are armed with this kind of knowledge. Right? General population doesn't, right? The general population will just read it and say, oh, okay, it's gonna do that. That's not the way that we want to operate. Are you with me here? Understand what I'm saying? We want to think critically, right? That's what I push my students. Think critically. Right? This is part of our, at least in theory, a lot of instructors do. But, that's part of the university education, I think, especially at the master's level. Think critically, question things, push things, right? That's what we need to do. Right. Any other points of clarification? Does that answer it okay?
Yes.
Are we good?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Are there any other questions or points along the way? No? Okay, so we've talked about three major functions, right? Let me talk about what I like to call, again, 100% there are going to be questions on the exam. So I hope that you understand this carefully. Well, what I call the hallmarks of good research. The hallmarks of good research, which I like to call the hallmarks of good research. What are the hallmarks of good research? Reliability and validity. Critically important here, reliability and validity. Reliability and validity. Now, we could talk for the next 2 years on reliability and validity. Very, very broad, right? All different types of reliability and validities and everything. We're not going to. We're going to talk for a few minutes on it only, okay? And we're just going to convey the important components of each. So, first of all, like I said, reliability and validity. We must, as researchers, right, and this is what I do for a living, I know a little bit. When we talk about reliability and validity, we must secure reliability and validity.
in our research, because if we do not, everything else downstream fails. So we must secure reliability and validity. We must have them. So let's talk about what they are though. They are the hallmarks of good research. We must secure them for those reasons. Reliability. The question then is, what is reliability? Here's how we can think of it. When we think of reliability at this point, at our level here, reliability, consistency. Reliability, consistency. Reliability, everybody say it?
Consistency.
Okay? Reliability.
Consistency.
Reliability. What is reliability?
Consistency.
So what does that mean? This is what it means. It basically means then is that consistency, reliability is the extent at which results are stable and consistent. That's what reliability is all about. So in other words, if I design an ABC test and I apply to Masters Management students here, and then I go to Ivy and I apply a similar kind of test to those students over there, and then I go to UCLA and apply it there, and one to Dell, and then I go to Cornell and apply it, and I get similar results, that's pretty consistent. That's reliability. So what does that tell me? That tells me that my instrument, i.e. my survey or my test, is reliable. That's a good thing, generally speaking. So that brings us then to what we call validity. Validity. So what is validity all about? Well, here we are talking about a particular, right here and now, we are talking about a type of validity that we call internal validity. And we will talk about external validity momentarily, but here we're talking about internal validity, i.e. validity, which answers the question. It answers this question. What is the, validity answers this question. Are you measuring what you intend to measure? Are you measuring what you intend to measure? Okay? Now here, just like everything else, you will note that I'm being very, very particular with my words, right? Words matter. I'm being very deliberate and careful about all of the words that I'm choosing here, right? So validity, internal validity specifically is what? Are you measuring what you intend to measure? So here you will note, I'm not saying, am I getting results that I want to get? No. Am I getting nice results? Am I getting cool results? Is the sun shining? I'm not asking any of that stuff. Am I measuring what I intend to measure? That's the thing. So therefore it begs the question, and I always like to ask this question too, as we seek to solidify our understanding of these two essential hallmarks. Can you have one without the other? Can you have one without the other? What do you think? Yes or no? Yes or no? Well,
No.
what does? Okay, so what does? What does it mean? Or are you passing? Yes, no, or pass? Yes, no, or pass?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, you can't. Why? Or is that just a
I
guess?
didn't think you would.
Okay, that's okay. No problem. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, yes or no? Yes or no? Can you have one without the other? Yes or no? You in the black shirt. Yes or no?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, so you're passing, right? Pass. Yes or no?
System can get the wrong, yeah.
So you can have one without the other, you are correct. Yes, you can have one without the other. In other words, yep, so therefore, you can consistently be measuring something, however, it might not be what you intend to
measure. Yeah.
Okay? However, so what does that mean? That means, yeah, we can have reliability without validity, absolutely. However, to have validity, you must have reliability. Okay? So yeah.
all German Shepherds are dogs, but not all dogs are German Shepherds. Right? So, yeah. So what would an example of that look like? Well, take this example. And I always like to give this example. Let's say, for example, I have a scale. Okay? It's an instrument. I have an instrument, a digital printout. I put it there. I step on it, and it spits out 300 to me. It spits out 300 to me. Get off, do it again, and it spits out 299. And then I do it over and over again. So then I get like 297, 295, 296, 299, 300, 300, 300, 301, 305, 307, 293, 299, 299, 300, 300, 301. Is that consistent? Yeah, what it is generally, okay? That data set is tight, actually. So yeah, that is very consistent. However, that is not the weight. What am I intending to measure? My weight. That has nothing to do with my weight. So you use something that does have validity. I am measuring what I am intending to measure, and I get, say, for argument's sake, 175. 175. That's my weight. So when I do get that consistently, what is that? Yes, I am measuring what I intend to measure, my weight at 171, and it measures it consistently. So therefore, it's checked off. Are you with me here?
Yep.
So reliability and validity are very, very important. Yeah.
So Professor, you had to measure your weight, right?
Yeah.
So
That's what I intend to measure.
Yeah, that is what you intend.
And this is just an example to illustrate.
Yeah, and so like every time you were measuring your weight, it was something completely different. Like either like there was a difference of 4 or 5 numbers in between, right?
Yeah.
So that was not consistent, right? Like it was in range.
Well, no, okay, we'll just forget it. Let's say it is there, because in reality, whenever we engage in multiple measurements, measurement theory suggests that you're not going to, especially in social sciences, you're not going to get the identical same result every single time. In reality, it varies around the mean and that kind of thing. And the reason why, and I don't want to get into all that detail, that there is an error that creeps into any kind of a measurement taken. And that error essentially consists of two major components, two major reasons why error creeps in. One is what we call systematic error, okay, which is like instrumental error, which is like, that thing is broken, so it's systematically been spilled, so there's that element of error. And then there's what we call a random error, which changes over time. So that might be, whatever I happen to eat, for example, or whatever I happen to wear during the measurement, and maybe the wind is blowing or something. You don't change, right? So the notion here is that you can reduce random error by enhancing your number of trials. More trials, the more error becomes. But not so with systematic. I'm going to way more detail. So the bottom line here, anyway, is that we have these two hallmarks of good research. So reliability is what?
Consistence.
Validity here, especially internal validity, is what?
You are measuring what you intended to measure.
What you intend to measure. Okay, so with that in mind, ladies, gentlemen, let us stop here.